And we are joined today by someone everyone around CBS knows very well, Scott Pelley. He's just written his first book. First of all, thanks so much for coming in.
Great to be with you, Mike, on CBS 2. Thank you.
Hey, it's an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you here. Scott Pelley, Truth Worth Telling is the name of the book. We've got a subtitle here, A Reporter's Search for Meaning in the Stories of Our Times. First of all, why a book?
Well, you know, Mike, it seemed to me that I had met the most fascinating people in the world who had really discovered the meaning of their life during some of the historic events of our times. And after 30 years at CBS, 20 of them at 60 Minutes, I just felt like sitting down and writing about these remarkable people that I'd met.
So we're not going to be reading a book about you here. This is a book about the people you've met along the way.
It's a memoir, but it's not a memoir about me. It's a memoir about the people that I've met along the way. The firefighters who I witnessed at Ground Zero when the buildings came down on 9/11. Bruce Springsteen, who is such an authentic artist that he just can't stop writing music. And a lot of people that you know and people that you don't know, but people that you'd like to know.
You were there, as you mentioned, before the towers even came down. Take us back to that moment and tell us a little bit about how you put it into the book and what inspired you about what you saw that day.
Well, I went down to West Street where the fire department incident command post was. I was about a block from the incident command post when I noticed the first tower, tower number 1, actually, with its television mast on top. And I was watching it, and it looked to me like the mast was waving back and forth.
It had to be inconceivable that the buildings could actually fall down, right, at that point?
Well, you know, it's funny you should mention that, Mike, because in doing the research on the book, one of the things I discovered was that no steel tower in the history of the world had ever collapsed because of fire. And that's
fascinating.
That's why there were 343 firemen in the buildings when they came down, all of them killed. And I wanted, in this first chapter, which is entitled Gallantry, I wanted to pay tribute to them. It had been on my mind now almost 20 years. It was the most wrenching experience of my life to watch the towers come down in front of me. I fell to my knees when tower number 1 came down and called out to God and said, Lord, take them all with no pain. And the next thing I know, I'm running. I'm in a crowd of people running. I'm hearing steel hitting the street behind me. I don't know how far I ran, but at some point I realized that the conflagration was beginning to die down, so I turned around, walked back into Ground Zero, and CBS News was on the air, as you'll remember, for 96 hours. No commercials, no breaks, all day, all night, 96 hours, and I believe that that was CBS News's finest hour.
Well, listening to what you're saying right now, it vicariously brought me to the moment, because, I mean, my goodness, I got goosebumps all over my body. I can only imagine you falling to your knees and then having to somehow pull it together and be able to report on that, because I've heard your reporting from that day, and I mean, my goodness, you were able to somehow pull it together. I don't know how you did it.
You know, Mike, one of the things I write about in the book is that there's no democracy without journalism. And on that day was the most important time in my life that the American people needed solid, independent reporting. There was no question about whether I and many others would go down to Ground Zero and report that scene as best we possibly could.
And it wasn't long after that when we were in Afghanistan, and of course, you've been on war fronts in various countries, including Afghanistan, and you met some folks over there, and I understand you profiled one of them in this book a little bit. Tell us about that young man.
Well, that's David Hall from Lorain, Ohio, who had worked in a Ford assembly line and decided that that wasn't enough in life for him, so he joined the Marines and went to Afghanistan. David was the Marine at the head of the line with the minesweeper, making sure that the path was safe for all the rest of the Marines. Tip of the spear, exactly right. And he lost his life to an IED. His story sort of haunted me for years. The 60 Minutes was there when he was killed, and many others in that same company of Marines in Afghanistan down in Helmand province. And many years later, I went to visit his parents because I couldn't get him out of my mind. And his parents explained to me what a giving person he was and how he always felt like he was everyone else's big brother. And they told me that they took his minesweeper away from him in the Marines and gave him a promotion, and he raised such a fit that they gave him the minesweeper back, and he went back to that job.
So he didn't have to be in that job?
He didn't have to be in that job, but it meant the world to him to protect his brothers. And he took that IED and was killed alone, as he always intended.
So he didn't have to be there, and yet that's where he was because that's where he wanted to be.
That's right. And that chapter is entitled Duty.
I think that kind of brings me up to the subtitle of your book, A Reporter's Search for Meaning in the Stories of Their Times. That's the kind of meaning you're talking about, this sense of self-sacrifice and devotion to your team and your country. Huh?
That's right, Mike. You know, the other chapters are called selflessness, audacity, authenticity, those sorts of things that I have found in these remarkable people like Elon Musk and, as I mentioned, Bruce Springsteen. You know, all of these amazing individuals who are leading us into this new American century.
And when you say this new American century, what do you think about the state of affairs right now? First of all, let's talk about journalism. Are you worried about the state of journalism right now in America? Because I know I've been out at O'Hare Airport when a guy will walk behind me and yell out fake news while I'm on the air.
Right. You know, Mike, I bet this has happened to you. Somebody came up to me on the street the other day and said, God, this must be a terrible time to be a reporter. And I said, no, this is the best time to be a reporter because the American people are looking at us now because of all this criticism. And we can show them what we do, why we do it. We can tell them about our values and our principles as journalists. And as I said a moment ago, there's no democracy without journalism. The founders gave us the power, right, over the government, but the only way we, the people, can exercise that power is with reliable, independent information, and that's where CBS 2 comes in, that's where you come in, that's where we all come in as journalists.
How concerned are you about the fact that people are questioning what we do so much, and that now you've got we have fake news out there everywhere. It's coming from totalitarian states at times, and it's probably only going to get worse because pretty soon we're going to be seeing a lot of voices dubbed into folks.
Well, there's a lot of fakery on the web these days, and that's an extremely dangerous thing. We've moved from a time of the information age. We're now in the disinformation age. You know, it's the rhetoric, Mike, that you just brought up that worries me the most. We were very frank in the last year I was anchoring the CBS Evening News about what the president was saying and whether it was true or not true and how we knew the difference. And that's when the president called CBS News the enemy of the American people. I went to the White House shortly after that with several other anchors. We'd all been invited to have lunch with the president. And I said, Mr. President, I'm concerned that this rhetoric will cause some poor, deranged individual to walk into a TV station or a newspaper and shoot the receptionist because she's the enemy of the American people. And the president looked at the ceiling and he looked back down at me and he said, I don't worry about that.
Oh
well,
goodness.
I worry very much about that. I think that some of the rhetoric that we're hearing on the right and on the left has become far too incendiary. And as Americans, we need to come back and meet in the middle, listen to each other, disagree, argue, but not put rhetoric out there that may cause violence.
Xenophobia, nationalism, we're seeing a lot of these things that have really created tremendous problems in American history, all seemingly coming back right now.
That's true. It's a troubling time. But you know what Madison wrote? He wrote that freedom of speech and freedom of the press are the rights that guarantee all the others. He knew as long as we could say what we wanted to say, write what we want to write, read what we want to read, then all the rights that he put in the Bill of Rights would be protected. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing a good, healthy American argument with independent information, but people need to be wary of what they're seeing on the internet.
Well, you're definitely someone who walks the walk and talks the talk, because I know you did some whistleblowing of yourself within the company of CBS some years ago, and you paid a bit of a price for that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you know, we went through this dark period at CBS News and CBS. Everybody's been reading about it over the last year or so. It's been very well reported, the issues of a hostile work environment and women in particular feeling that they were not being respected in the workplace. But what's great now, Mike, is that the company has taken really strong action. We have a new chairman of the whole corporation, Joe Iannello, who's a visionary CEO, a man that I've known many years. We have a new president of the news division, Susan Zirinsky. I'm a little embarrassed to admit she's the first woman president of CBS News, but
it's about time. That's great.
It's way about time. But she has CBS News DNA. I've known her for 30 years. And then we have a new executive producer of 60 Minutes, Bill Owens, a man I have literally been in combat with in Iraq. And he is just the most highly principled person I've ever met in the news business. So I've never been more excited than I am right now about CBS.
About CBS, and it sounds like about the country as well.
Yes, absolutely. You know, Walt Whitman wrote about poets. He who sees the furthest has the most faith. So I take the long view on everything, and in taking the long view, I've got a lot of faith in this country and CBS and our ability to get along in the future.
Well, it's amazing that you've written this book, Scott Pelley, Truth Worth Telling, a reporter's search for meaning in the stories of our times. Thanks so much for coming in. It's really a pleasure to meet you and to be able to sit down and talk with you for a few minutes.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, sir.